be spending more time up here. I'd like to come up and visit.
Up on the Chevy Impala.
There's no doubt. Wait a minute, I gotta find the agenda, John. Okay, 5:30, having arrived, I'm going to call a meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Just microphone adjusted. Our first order of business is review of the outstanding minutes from July 8th.
Move to accept.
Second. We've got a motion and a second, and we have two sets of minutes. I'm assuming that your motion covers both the minutes of the public hearing that preceded the 5:30 meeting and the 5:30 meeting, which began a few minutes later.
Yes.
Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Appears to be unanimous,
Abstention?
with one abstention. Thank you, Fred. That would be Fred McGarry with the abstention. Okay. Moving on to the accounts payable manifest. We have an accounts payable manifest dated July 22nd in the amount of $72,752.28.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, I didn't ask. Those opposed? Just in case. Okay, I will move to the signatures next. Okay, we have several items from the town clerk tax collector. The first is a refund request, and this is a refund of $1,024 back to CoreLogic, and this is much like the ones we signed last week. It was an overpayment.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye. Okay, we have a second refund request, and this was an overpayment on the registration of a 1994 Ford Ranger. Mr. Gerald Eddington, and the request from the town clerk is to refund $10. So moved. Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
We have a couple of appointment requests. The first is from the VZ Park Commission, and they are requesting that we appoint Cody Lloyd to the VZ Board, or the VZ Board, the VZ Park Commission as a commission member, with a term of office expiring April 30th, 2022.
Make a motion, we accept that.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Discussion. I believe Cody is Glenda's son. Certainly familiar with the beach and probably familiar with the VZ Park duties as well. Okay, if there's no further discussion, those in favor?
Aye.
And the second appointment request is from the Parks and Rec Commission, and this is to appoint Erica Menard to a vacant position on the Parks and Rec Commission, term of office extending through April of 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
That fill the board up?
In relation to the,
Peter?
Different Menard, I
Two.
believe.
to any of the Menard.
I don't believe so.
Okay, we've got a couple of odds and ends that require signatures. This first one will require a motion. This is a request for an abatement/computer adjustment for property owned by NEP LLC, care of Alan Carr, Westbrook, Maine. And this was equipment that was on the top of Saddleback Mountain. I believe it was broadcasting equipment that we had appraised, and all the equipment has been removed. Apparently has not been there for a little bit of time now, and it's been verified that the equipment is not there, and they are seeking an abatement, and Avatar is recommending that we grant the abatement.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
And the next three don't require a motion. I'll just read them. We have a notice of intent to cut wood or timber from Shirley Hutchins, 379 Courier Road. We have another notice of intent to cut wood or timber from Garth Villaire, 75 North Road. And we have a notice of intent to excavate from Paul Smith. And this is Paul's Pit off of Blake's Hill Road.
As a point of information, Mr. Smith's pit was grandfathered under the statutes and passed in 1986, so.
Good.
I believe it was 86.
So it's appropriate to sign his notice of intent. Looking at the correspondence file, we have nothing that requires action. We've got a letter from the governor, a letter from the legislature, basically telling us what they're doing with regard to the budget and what we should be thinking about with regard to the budget. There's a letter from Ted Gatsas with actions taken by the executive council and a little bit of other information, but nothing that requires action. Moving on to the town administrator's report.
I have a good number of items tonight. First of all, to update the board on the work that's been done. Both the roof replacement on the George B. White and the town hall painting have been completed all of last week. So those projects are behind us. The roof came out very well, and as did the painting. Ray was pleased with both. The gazebo roof needs to be replaced. That was roofed with cedar shakes at the time. We have one set of quotes to replace the cedar shakes. We also have a little over $6,000 left in a fund from the initial building of the gazebo. The first quote we had come in for the shakes was well over $10,000. I asked if asphalt roofing could be done, which is a lot less expensive. However, I was told that it was never built with sheathing underneath, so that would have to all be added if we were even going to consider asphalt roofing. It's just got slats underneath to hold the cedar shakes. But when I have more information and more quotes, I'll bring that to the board. I just want to put it out there. The roof needs to be replaced. There's painting that needs to be done. And Ray is working with our current landscaper to cut all the bushes back. They haven't been touched in a while. So that should be dressed up for Old Home Day at least. I'll have more to post on that when I have it. You do have a sheet in your packet which outlines a request coming from IT and myself to purchase new computers for some of the staff in this building. The issue that's facing us is that many of these machines have Office Windows 7, and it's no longer going to be supported at the first of the year, which means there are no security updates, and Steve recommends strongly against running machines without security updates coming from Microsoft. He's outlined the different pricing aspects of this proposal. The unfortunate thing is we don't have any budget money. This would all be proposed to come out of a potential surplus at the end of the year, which we won't really have an idea until November, December of what we're looking at. But I wanted to put this out to the board now to think about as we get closer to the budget. His request would be to purchase these items within 2019 so that he can get them ordered, up and running before the deadline of January 2020 when the software stops being supported. There are some additional expenditures in 2020, but they can be held off a little bit. I'll
Looking
leave.
ahead, would he need to get the computers to be able to get them?
As soon as possible, because it would take at least several weeks to get them installed, the new machines up and running, to make sure that they're in place.
It's 20, right? 20 PCs?
20 PCs, yes. And the reason he's opting for new systems altogether is they will come loaded with the Windows 10, as opposed to purchasing the licensing for the new Windows product and then putting them on old machines. If we were ever to lose those old machines, the license goes, you have to buy it again. So that's why he's saying that the better price is to just buy a new machine. These are older and getting tired.
Yeah, just a correction, it says 19 in the first sentence.
My fault. He added one more and I didn't correct the language. Thank you, Jeff. So it is 20. I've completed all the yearly staff evaluations. I have to meet with each staff person. Once those are done, they'll be available for the board to come in my office and review at your convenience. I'll let you know. You also have an invoice, 2 invoice proposals. They're back-to-back for lighting at the transfer station. One's a Rexall invoice for the actual lighting fixtures, and the other one is a quote to actually come in and install the lighting fixtures. Rick would like to use impact fees to improve the lighting in and around the transfer station. It's older, it doesn't cover the areas that the public needs to use, especially when the fall and winter comes in and the transfer station is still open. There are many containers that are not well lit at this time, and this would improve it.
Yeah, I think Rick had mentioned to me in the last budget cycle that he felt by moving to LED, based on the old lights that we've got there too, we could realize a pretty significant electrical savings. What we've got there now
We've got very old light
spins the
fixtures.
needle, when they're running.
So if the board would like to consider this tonight and make a decision, we can get these ordered. If you want to wait, that's fine as well. I just want to leave this with you.
What's the board's pleasure with regard to,
Well, I got a question. I don't see the labor.
It's on the back, Dick. Two-sided
I was
copy.
looking at the second page, sorry.
That's all right. And that's an not-to-exceed figure. He couldn't give him an exact quote.
So would that be written up as 2 different?
There would be 2 different bills, not to exceed $2,867. And that would come out of impact fees.
So I'll make a motion to purchase the lights if Rick thinks that's where we should get them from.
do we have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Further discussion?
I think the fact that we're improving the lighting that's there and also saving electricity, this isn't really a maintenance item as such. So therefore, impact fees would be appropriate.
Right.
So we're looking at a total of $3,000 for install and fixtures, right?
More than that.
Not to exceed
Not to exceed 3,000,
5,000.
5,000.
Yeah.
5,500.
But I just do the
Where-
lights separate.
Where is that?
The lights themselves are quoted down at the bottom of the first page. It's $25.67 from Rexall. And then within the body of the email,
That's 3.
it says not to exceed $3,000 for the labor.
Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Appears to be unanimous. Thanks,
Okay.
Sean.
I can get back to Rick on that.
What do you want to do about labor? I
What's
just
your
didn't-
proposal?
You just
for-
voted it.
I just made the motion for the lights to purchase them. I didn't know we
Oh, okay.
could do it as each. Because the lights are a fixed cost and the other one is not to exceed, so we should have 2 different motions.
Okay. I would entertain a second motion for the labor portion of the proposal.
Make that motion for a not to exceed price of $3,000.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second for the labor to install the equipment. Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Appears to be unanimous.
Thank you. That's all I have tonight.
Okay. Unfinished business? New business. I've got several things I'd like to mention under new business, 4 of which I had talked with John a little bit about and planned on bringing up, and one that just showed up in my folder this evening. But I'll start with the 4 that I'm familiar with. Our next meeting is going to be in August. We're heading right into budgeting season. There are some warrant articles that I'd like the board to consider, and I don't know what your pleasure is, but a couple of things that come to mind for me are wondering if we want to consider putting a public works position warrant article in place, trying it again in this year's election. We've tried it in the past unsuccessfully, and this would encompass primarily the highway department, but could also include the transfer station. I'm not sure who we're looking at for candidates in the upcoming election, but I'm thinking that that might have some value to this board and the town to consider.
So would that be in place of the highway agent?
It would. You have to put a warrant article on the warrant. I believe it has to get a 2/3 vote. And it gives the selectmen the ability to hire and supervise a public works director as opposed to an elected highway official. And typically, towns would also include the transfer station and other things like that under that position.
That makes sense.
We looked at it before, in sort of a moment of crisis. We had a year when the road agent resigned, as I recall, in November, after serving a few months, and we couldn't find that actually was the start of Mr. Cody as road agent. He was the only one that would agree to take the position at the time. I don't want to be back in that position, and I want to throw that out there for the board to consider it. Obviously, we've got from now till January to decide whether that's something we'd like to pursue or not, but the other thing that I want to mention, I spoke with Dana Vanderby and Maureen Mann regarding the cemetery trustees. At their last meeting, they discussed moving their authority and basic role back to the Board of Selectmen. They are feeling overrun by budget constraints, too much work, too much paperwork, and a lot of dissatisfaction from folks regarding cemeteries that are being maintained or not being maintained. There is a specific RSA 289:6, I'm going to say subsection C, that authorizes the movement of the cemetery trustees. Basically, they're dissolved and the Board of Selectmen take over the authority. I think the biggest driving factor behind this is there are literally hundreds of trust funds for the cemetery. When you and basically there are huge trust fund and budgetary concerns. So when you sign up for perpetual care, there are trust funds that are assigned to specific grave sites and specific cemeteries, and you can't just combine the money and use it for whatever needs to be done the most. And I think it's gotten to the point where it's overwhelming to the Cemetery Commission. And you have to have a pretty good understanding of how trust funds and that sort of thing work to stay on top of it as well. They looked around at what other communities had done, and a number of other communities, small towns about the size of us that have a large number of cemeteries that are old, had moved it back to the Board of Selectmen, which doesn't make the problem go away, but.
You're right.
And I think their intent would be to try to form a Friends of the Cemetery Commission that would focus on making the cemeteries look good on a volunteer basis and doing lost grave research and that sort of thing, and leave the managing of the hundreds of trust funds and accompanying budget matters up to the Board of Selectmen. But I just wanted to give the board a heads up that that's on the agenda. Two other warrant articles that I wanted the board to consider. One is a police department warrant article. We had a committee last year that came up with some ideas that clearly the money we had to plan further was shot down in the last budget cycle. Talking to some older selectmen, probably the oldest existing Deerfield selectman in town, he suggested that you should just get RFPs. He said, you got a pretty good idea where you want to put it. You got a pretty good idea what you need. So why don't you advertise for RFPs and see what you get? He said you'd have a project and you'd have a proposal that you could sell, and you probably would not need to spend any money out of this budget cycle to get that, and you could move forward to the community with it and see if you could get it passed
Wonderful.
at election. So I wanted to throw that out there as well as an idea, and that probably has more impetus than the other things I've mentioned, just because we're headed into August, and if that's something we want to do, we need to do it fairly quickly. I know there is interest in this among several of the members of the police department committee from last year. 3 or 4 people, three of which have engineering and construction experience. And the police chief, I believe, would be very much behind moving with this too. But I'm going to throw that out there. And the last thing that I'll mention, road maintenance warrant article. I know Mr. Verville has mentioned this at budget committee meetings over the last few years, and I think that road reconstruction particularly, we seem to be getting a little bit behind on in terms of budgeting. I know I've certainly been pulled aside by more people than I've ever been pulled aside by as a selectman to talk about bumps in the road and coal patch and what are we doing. And I think that, the road agent has been very responsible in his budgeting, and I think that we've, probably been lean on this because of the road agent's eye towards keeping the budget at a place where he thought he could get it passed. And I'm thinking that possibly a road maintenance warrant article not specific to any particular road, because you tend to get the people that live on that road to vote for it, and the people that don't live on that road not to, and defeat it. But that would enable us to tackle some things like Cole Road, Candia Road, Haynes Road, any of the roads we've got that have got large sections that are really beyond just needing to be shimmed up or paved, but have, some collapsed sections, holes, really damaged pavement. So I wanted to throw those out there for the board to consider and maybe take action on at the next meeting, at least with regard to the PD warrant article. The others are certainly just, we could head into the budget cycle thinking about whether we wanted to use any of those or not. But
What's your idea on the police department? How much work do you want the RFP to say? Is it just up to construction, through construction, design?
I don't know exactly. I feel like we took a good run at it last year and then just let it drop again, and
Right.
we're in as bad a need of a new police department as we ever were, so
Okay.
I just am trying to put some focus back on it.
I think we're long overdue on that one.
Andy?
Yeah, Fred.
Yeah, I think, we certainly could take that approach. I'm somewhat hesitant. Generally, I haven't done too many design-build contracts. That's what this would end up being. You don't think so?
Not necessarily.
No?
That was what was recommended, really, by the folks, or a hybrid of the design-build concept, I believe the engineer that gave us the most information talked about, but.
But I would think we'd at least need to have a topographic plan of what's out there right now to be able to have available. And then we certainly need specifications of what we want,
Mhm.
what that building would actually consist of, and then leave it up to whoever.
I think I don't know that we've got exactly what we need, but we have, I think, a fair idea of, and I know Steve Keach provided us some of the topographic information for the site across the street. Certainly spent some time over there himself. We don't have, hard and fast survey copies, no. We also had some information about building size and the components that we needed that were fairly accurate from, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but from an engineering firm that builds a number of municipal buildings, including police departments. Clearly, I don't know too much about the construction process, and I know other gentlemen on the board here do, but I just, I think we should be more proactive than we've been, I guess, is
We
what
need to
I'm
get going on it.
looking at. If it takes
No.
another year, so be it.
You can always make changes, but at least we're going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I'll mention is Raymond Ellis gave John a letter to give to us, and I've only got one copy, so I'll have John distribute this to the rest of you, and we can probably go into a non-public at next meeting to discuss this, but he's interested in reviewing his contract that he has with us and basically what he's doing, what he's expected to do, what he's being paid, that sort of thing. So I would, as I said, I'll have John make copies of this and get it to everybody on the board.
Okay.
I think as we go into the, John mentioned too that he had done the review of all the town employees. We also are going to need to, in the not too distant future, probably review John and discuss that.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I've talked for as long as the meeting went, anybody else have anything they want?
What is this surplus thing that was in our file?
I think that is sample language of the surplus policy.
So we're gonna just change the dates from,
Oh. My error, I did have one more thing. Thank you, Dick. What you have in your packet to review, to discuss today, Cindy had talked a little bit about it. This is a method that other communities use to handle surplus materials, equipment, vehicles, items in their inventory. It's basically a published article, and there is a pre-printed bid sheet, and then also a list of the surplus equipment and anything that the town has in, for an offer. The Board of Selectmen would have the opportunity to place a minimum bid for a piece of equipment or item, or just simply leave it as make an offer. And there are dates involved and deadlines for any particular parties to be interested to submit their bid in. And these would be available online or in hard copies through the town clerk's office. I borrowed this method from another community and just adapted it to Deerfield. This includes all of the fire department surplus that you have previously looked at. Cindy mentioned one more item, the Cascade system, which I'll check with Matt. The cargo van, the maroon one from Parks and Rec, which is in need of being surplus, you've discussed that before, and also the 2010 Chevy Impala, which is the former lieutenant's vehicle from the police department, which Gary wanted to include in this as well. So I just want to give you an opportunity to look it over, see if you like this process. I know we've mentioned possible auction at one time, but some of these items, I don't know if an auctioneer would want to come to town to try to auction off. It's quite an eclectic mix.
The commission is likely to be slim for,
And this,
is there anything else from the quote evidence room of police besides the cruiser?
I asked Gary a generic question, you know, what items do you have to put towards this? He did not mention anything from the evidence room.
Well, I meant his surplus. There wasn't anything.
He mentioned only the vehicle.
Okay.
you could certainly follow up with him and see
Sure.
if there's anything that we.
But this is, I would like the board just to look at this process if you're comfortable with it. It's kind of a self-serving
Looks good. We're making
method, and it would get things out there, and then whatever's left, I think we've gone through the process of giving people an opportunity to make a bid or take it, and you folks can decide what you want to do at that point.
Is the list something we'd go over and see? I mean, I see a few things on here. Why are we getting rid of them?
This, are you talking about the fire department?
This whole list, yeah.
Those are all the items that Matt presented to the board previously, and he had pictures and a list, and nothing's changed on that other than,
I'm just saying this list, whether it be this list or the next list.
this is the list that I have now based on Matt's original list, and then the addition of the
He
Parks
could
and Rec.
update it then.
He could, yeah. It's whatever the board decides to put on this list, it comes, this is just a draft. It's what I have now.
Okay, if there's nothing further, I would look to citizens' comments.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor?
6:05.
All right.
Aye.
Great. I'm going to give you that, John, if you could.
I will.
Just forward a copy to each member of the boards.
I will.
Look at my file. So-